to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great companies. My name is Brad Giles, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence in Vancouver, Canada. G'day, Kevin. How are things today in your part of the world?
They're good. It's dark. It's the end of the day. But we're coming into our spring and our winter, and it's getting exciting. We had actually the other day we had like a little sample of spring, and it was really exciting. Sometimes when it happens, we're like, "Oh, is this real? Is this not real?" But yeah, it was real. So yeah, we're into the best season of where we live. Well, like a lot of places, the summertime. So
I reckon seasons are just the right amount of time. After 90 days, you're ready to move on.
Yeah, I would suggest it. It's nice. There's a little novelty, and it's awesome. Although I don't need summer to move on. I think summer could extend a little bit longer than it does here. Up in where we are in Vancouver, it'd be nice if it extended. But hey, that's we live where we choose to live. Or where our families chose to live would be another way of looking at it. But yes.
Yeah, that's true. So tell me, we like to start with a word or phrase of the day. What might be on your mind this morning, Kev?
Perspective. Perspective is the word. And from so many things, the most important thing as leaders and humans is to be able to have the right perspective in different situations. And there's infinite perspectives you can have, but when you have the right perspective, it enables you to generally do the right things and to generally feel good about the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
So perspective, ability to shift your perspective, or have perspective on your perspective. But it's really to see things from outside yourself, from a bigger picture view. And it's important to just everything, and how important it is, and how I appreciate things that allow me to be able to have so many different perspectives on issues through the other great people I've worked with and the things that I've learned.
Yeah. Awesome. So for me, it would be multiply. Now, thinking in particular,
like as in 9 times 9.
Yeah. Okay. Very much so. Thinking about people and their capability, and really you're multiplying their capability. It's a little bit of the Liz Wiseman stuff, but yeah. So when someone doesn't have the capability, i.e. they're at zero or close to zero, you don't have a lot to actually multiply. So, making sure that people are are capable of succeeding in the role, that they understand how to succeed in the role, and that they want to succeed in the role. That's the raw multiplier that we have as leaders that we're trying to work with. But if those numbers aren't there, you don't have much to multiply against.
I like that. So you can take. I like that. Okay, I'm not even going to try and smash those together. So let's get into what we're talking about today. Speaking of multiplication and perspective, what we're talking about today, the most important number that CEOs rarely measure, especially entrepreneurial CEOs, as they're learning, because it's almost a more advanced skill, let's call it, an advanced perspective.
Yeah.
And it's a special type of multiplication. and really what we're getting into today is really understanding return on capital as a key measure in business. It is considered to be the number one measure of a CEO. For example, if Brad and I were each given $10 million to build a company, and 5 years later, Brad is making $10 million a year off that initial $10 million of capital, and I'm making 5, Brad has double the return on capital at that point in time than I do. He gets twice the juice from the fruit. And so he's considered to be a better CEO or a better juicer, or better getting a return on capital if he's able to do that year after year after year. So it's not just how much you make, it's how much you make based on how much capital you are using to make it. So basically, if the return is the income statement maximizing the profitability divided by the balance sheet, in simple terms, or how much capital you're given, it's really leveraging the income statement in context of the balance sheet, or making profit in context to how much cash you're using to make that profit. And it's a super important piece. And we get so lost in profitability and so lost in what we're doing. A lot of people don't even look at it. And that's kind of what we're digging into a bit more about today.
It makes me think about a statement that Peter Drucker said, that a manager's job is to be efficient, but an executive's job is to be effective. How do we operate as effectively as possible with the capital constraints or with the capital that we're given? That's what it is. That's what a great leadership team does. That's what I like to say to the leadership teams that I work with. Ultimately, everything comes down to, given the balance sheet that you're delivered, all of the intellectual property, the assets, the cash, a great leadership team maximizes the output from that, the return on that.
Right. Maximizes the output in context of that versus just maximizing the output. And that's why a lot of times as companies grow, executives get so focused on profitability that it often really hurts the cash flow, or they end up using more capital and they don't realize it along the way. And you actually look at the return on capital measures, and it's often a little bit on the weak side or the low side, which we'll get into. But before we do, so I mention, if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, please subscribe and share it with people you know, right? This is episode 159. We've done this a couple of times, and we're sharing the best we have. And we're happy for you to share it with others. But please subscribe, give it a rating or a thumbs up if you haven't just yet. So one of the things to put in context as we're talking about this, we got to remember a business produces profit based on an amount of capital, and that's called return on capital. Well, you're competing against it because you could just take the capital and throw it in the stock market. You could throw it in some old mutual fund or give it to investment manager. You could buy a chunk of real estate, or in today's day and age, you could just leave it in your checking account and get a reasonable amount of interest. And unfortunately, some people will be better today leaving the capital in their checking account, not in their business. And so what we want you to do is to learn and get perspectives on making sure that not only should you not leave your capital in a checking account or savings account instead, or should you invest in a real estate or the stock market, you are actually deserving of and are an optimal place for your and other people's capital. That's kind of what we're getting into, is that to really make sure it's an exceptional place for your capital to grow. And there's a great book, and Brad and I talked about this in our top books episode we did probably 5 episodes ago.
Yeah.
What was that episode? I don't remember the name of that episode, Brad. If you happen to, we can call that.
I do. Just use some filler words for a moment, Kev.
Okay. Should I do a little song and dance? But so the book is called The Outside. Oh, here he is. Come on, here, come on. Go ahead, Brad.
This is how prepared we are today, right? Episode 155, the 9 books every CEO must read. It's one of these top 9 books.
Excellent. Top 9 books. So this was one. It's called The Outsiders, and it's 8 unconventional CEOs and their radically rational blueprint for success. And one second here. The essence of the book is the ultimate measure of a CEO's performance is return on the pool of cash they're given, return on invested capital. Almost all but one of those CEOs you probably haven't heard of because they're not in the limelight. They're not worried about that. They're grinding it out, providing unbelievable returns for their shareholders over time. And it's a book called The Outsiders. It's amazing. It's a game-changing book because it really brings the return on invested capital to life. And one of my clients in India, we started looking at this probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we read this book. And we started looking at the whole business through return on invested capital. And then we looked at it overall. And then we started looking at it by unit and then by investment. It's so steeped and deep in the DNA now. We talk about it with everything. It's part of every conversation, and not even just myself and the 3 directors, but at the executive team level, it's part of our view. And by the way, we found some things we really didn't like. Now, and we came up with some freaking brilliant moves that we never would have made before. We only found them And we were doing in the business, we didn't pay attention. We found these little pockets of brilliance, these pockets of spectacular return on invested capital, but they were counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And now that we understand it, we can better optimize it. And our strategy has evolved. I'd say no, there's been a couple notable moves in our strategy because of our understanding this and because of our drive for this, because we're creating a better business by pulling different levers than we thought we would. I mean,
Can you give us an example of a counterintuitive idea?
Yes. Take a project that you're going to do and you're going to make a lot of money on, and let's get a partner involved with us. So let's just say I'm making up these numbers. These aren't real numbers, but
sure.
If we were going to do a project and we were going to make $20 million on it, let's bring in a partner and only make 10. We'll give them half the profit. That's counterintuitive. Wait a sec. We're going to give away half of our profit? Are you crazy? Are you blah, blah, blah? Well, son, let's do some math here. Let's do some quick math. If we bring in a partner who puts up all of the money, and we put up 0 on a project that would provide about a 40%, let's say this one, even 25% return on invested capital annually.
Yep.
But we have no capital in it. If we put up all the capital, we get 40%. If we put up, let's just say, almost no capital, we get like a 14 million% return on invested capital.
That's not bad.
We get half the profit without any cash.
Yeah.
But do you understand now why we give away half? Sorry if I sound condescending. I'm just trying to play a little bit. But the reality is, it's like, well, if you don't put up any capital, but you still get half the return, damn, that's good. By the way, in this model, you also reduced your risk dramatically. Indeed. Not only do you get half the return, notably less than half the risk, and your return on invested capital just went to the moon. So
that's good. I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
And that model works if you go do more projects.
Yeah.
If you don't, and you have a whole bunch of capital sitting on the sidelines, it doesn't work because it enables you to do more with less risk and dramatically better return.
Love it. One of the interesting ideas here is that if you're in a leadership team, either you're the leader or you're a leadership team member, you may think about competition as being the competitors who sell the same product. But one of the founding ideas here is that in actual fact, there is another competitive element, which is the return on capital, on invested capital, that the owners and or shareholders are getting, because they're looking at this business and they're saying, hang on, I could get 30% if I went with this other investment, and I'm only going to get 15% or whatever number it is if I keep this money in the business. And so there is another layer of competition that's occurring at the shareholder level, because the shareholders want to get the best return that they can.
Yes. So it's a more advanced way of thinking for a lot of business people. And as a business gets bigger, you need to think about it because there's more capital tied up in a business. There's a whole other piece of this. By the way, it's not just about maximizing returns. It's about using less capital.
Yeah.
It's about having less capital in inventory or in products or locked up in a business. So there's many levers to get here. So the key thing, first thing, number one, we got our 5 points is we like to have some points, but is you got to know your number. You got to figure out your number, and which ties into point 2, and get granular, just like you would with profitability. You want to look at it by product or by location or by investment or by whatever it is your business is broken up into. You really want to know your number and just know where you stand, because again, your alternative is the stock market, a savings account, a treasury bond, or whatever it happens to be. Obviously, we want to outperform those dramatically. And good businesses consistently produce 20-30% is a nice place to be.
Mhm.
And it should be 20 or 30% based on the risk in a lot of businesses. Obviously, there's some that do way more, and those are even better. So I talked about that client, and we found the one thing I want to tell you though is that it does flush out some ugly things. And there's some things when you start to look at it, and especially when you start to use this for decision making, you realize that when you start to take into account the balance sheet or capital, some decisions just don't make sense. And it's you got to give yourself some permission that, hey, not everything needs to make complete sense financially. There's room for, we'll call them pet projects or whatever it happens to be.
Or gambles.
But
Yep.
It is. And I mean, there's some people that, based on this, in a sort of stagnant or low demand market, a lot of people wouldn't want to buy real estate if there's not big appreciation, right? If you're in a market where there's appreciation, it's different. So everyone's got different, but it's a brutal number, and it helps you make notably better decisions.
Yeah. There's one leader owner that I work with. He works in the business. He owns the business as a sole owner. And he made the comment, what I do is I invest in real estate development, and then I take the money that I get from that and I invest it in this business. Now, that's just a comment, and it was supposed to gain a laugh, but I don't think that the leaders really appreciated just how cutting it was about the failure of the business to compete with the other investments that the leader had. And I think they just thought, yeah, that's funny. It's been a tough market and something else. But it can be that this is the competition that we're talking about, that we need to perform.
Yep. So if you know your number and get granular on it, the next thing is to start to get reporting on this, so you see how your decisions play out, and really see how it plays, and training your team to understand it. That is critical, because a lot of people do not understand it. Some people barely understand an income statement, and that's just, but to understand how it correlates to the balance sheet or getting a return on cash, you got to train people on it, start reporting on it. Your CFO often gets involved in helping to bring this to life. One of the organizations that we did this in, and done it many, but the CFO would run classes. He would do capital basics, and they would go and train people on this. They would show the models. They would get them to work with some things to test it out. But basically, even they did with the execs and the senior leadership team and some of the managers, just to start getting their mind around it so they could have eyes open to it. And then when it was part of the reporting, everyone could see it and understand it. And I've already gave the example here of some of these ideas that started to come out of the team, like, hey, let's make sure we take on partners, and almost always take on partners, because it dramatically increases our return. And as we shared before, it takes away a lot of the risk. Because
it's all of the little decisions that we make along the way, all of the decisions that create that return. And when you compound that over multiple years, that's, like you said at the beginning, that's the difference between a good or a great output or return for the shareholders. And that's kind of one of the reasons that we're here, if not the main reason.
I read this great report. I won't use the actual names, but there was 2 heavy equipment companies in North America, which would be well-known names by people that deal with heavy equipment. But I read this report from an analyst on the 2 companies, and it got down to the core of it. They were both seen as being great, but one was considered in the end, and stock price reflected it, to be twice the company others were, even though they were the same size.
Wow.
Because one had double the return on capital.
Yeah.
And the CEO of one had made a whole bunch of decisions that might look good, and they were able to beat their chest and be proud of what they're doing. At the end of the day, the ultimate measure, the one company year on year crushed the other one in terms of return on capital. Now, they were both competitive in the market, and they both compete. They were like, they weren't equal competitors, but they were both 2 big competitors.
Yeah.
But one was twice the effective machine that the other was from that lens, and then market reflected that.
And that's that competition. There's a business, the business that I work with, they own the owners own two businesses. They're kind of somewhat related, and they look at one business and it's got a certain return, and the other businesses has a much lower return. And it's hard to not say we need to invest more in the business that produces a better return. It's just market dynamics.
And we had another one when we started doing this. We looked at the profitability at a deep level and return on invested capital. We had a 45-year-old business.
Yeah.
And we had to shut down the part of the business that the whole thing was based on. Because when we looked at from a profitability and a return on invested capital perspective, the one we shouldn't have been in it 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, it took a couple of years to do it, a lot of change because we were based on a certain thing. But the next business that we were in was where the future was. And it's actually where we were, even the present was. And we had to kill off the old business. And again, it's fine. You don't have to do these things overnight. But when you start analyzing it, and if someone's, no, we got to make this work. Okay, let's try. But when you try to make it work and you can't move the needle and you see you got to invest more capital, it's even, by the way, just as a side note, there's also why there's a thing in called the capital light business. There's capital heavy, where you invest the capital and you get the return on it. But capital light, or asset light, they call it.
Yeah.
Is when you're almost brokering things. So for example, there was a business I worked with in the US, and their asset heavy businesses, they had a whole fleet of service trucks running around fixing equipment all around the US. That was the traditional business. The asset light one was someone that says, I got an idea. I'll go help out the Walmarts of the world. They call us and we'll facilitate the stuff getting fixed with all of these companies across the country that have all of these trucks. So it's asset light. It's brokering and using other people's capital that's at work. And those asset light businesses get a very high valuation sometimes because there's no capital.
Yeah.
There's almost no capital tied up, and someone might have, $100 million of trucks and equipment, and you've got a call center with some people on it. Anyway, there's other versions of it to go and dial in this number. But the idea here is understand how you're performing based on the capital you're using and to take it into account with all of your decisions.
Because all of those decisions compound over time to create sometimes a massively different output. And so focusing on what is that output and how are the decisions that I'm making today connected to that, or maybe even you've got some decisions that you need to make. Well, how's that going to contribute to your ROIC, your return on invested capital?
Right. So going back to the word perspective at the beginning that I was checking, is that, at the end of the day, this is a different perspective to bring to your business. Many people are focused on their profitability or their EBITDA or their cash flow, and that's good. And it's of you. But the other is the return on capital, return on invested capital, which gives you a second, slightly more sophisticated view to look at your business. All are good, but this gives you another dimension to look at on your investments and all of your decisions to help you build a better machine over time. And, you got to know where you stand and know your number granularly. You got to get some better reporting and start to include it in decisions. And then you got to say no to a lot of stuff that stops working and making enough to do it instantly. But your model will continue to pivot and change and hopefully get stronger and stronger.
Very good. Very good. Return on invested capital. It's really the thing that is, as we said at the title, it's the most important number that CEOs rarely measure, but should measure, because this can help you to make the right investment decisions moving forward, which is one of your key responsibilities. Good. Hope that you've enjoyed the episode today. Make sure that you think about what's your ROIC and how can you begin to utilize that in your business. A couple of key points here. Get to know your number today. Get granular, just like with profitability, by location, by product, by investment. Make sure that you can track it as a business monthly or quarterly, and get your team to understand it. And then put it, when you're making investment decisions, make that one of the key criteria that you're analyzing. And then say no to the things that no longer add up, and this will compound up over time. So good chat today. Hopefully we've given you a bit of a different insight through an accounting lens, perhaps, but such an important lens. Hopefully you've been able to stick through this, because this is what creates the real results that we talk about that help you to endure. So you can find us on YouTube. If you would prefer to see our smiling faces, that would be if you just search The Growth Whisperers, you'll find us there. Obviously, we'd love for you to like and subscribe wherever you listen, be it on audio or video. You can find Kevin and his interesting weekly newsletter at lawrenceandco.com, and myself and my interesting weekly newsletter at evolutionpartners.com.au, where we both dig into various topics related to building enduring great companies. I hope that you have enjoyed the episode today. And yeah, we certainly have. We look forward to chatting to you again next week. Do enjoy your week. Take care.